The shuttle shuddered once as it broke through the upper atmosphere of Hestaron Four, a world infamous for its violent weather cycles and sulfur-choked air. From orbit, it looked like a cracked marble dipped in rust and fog. Inside the vessel, Ethan Morley squinted through the viewport, tugging at the collar of his environmental suit. "You sure this thing's calibrated?" he asked, tapping the small screen on his forearm. "It says 72 Fahrenheit. The alien beside him, a tall, slate-skinned being named Vetrinox, didn't glance over. Its 7 eyes blinked in a slow, asynchronous pattern. "You are mistaken. Your device is malfunctioning. The surface temperature exceeds that which liquefies most organic brain matter. We have lost 6 inspection drones in the last 2 rotations." Ethan adjusted the strap on his helmet. "Feels like a mild summer in Tucson." Vetrinox slowly turned its head. "Tucson, never mind," Ethan said, grinning faintly. "You guys got a landing pad, or am I just about to improvise?" The vessel groaned as it descended into the haze. Buffeting winds jostled them like a toy in a bathtub. Lightning arced sideways across the sky, not from clouds, but from the charged surface itself. The shuttle's exterior shields flared, absorbing the bursts. "Your resilience continues to disturb me," Vetrinox muttered. "Just good insulation." The shuttle touched down roughly on a wide, scorched plateau. The moment the hatch opened, the heat hit Ethan like a punch. His suit's internal cooling system whirred louder, but he stepped out with a steady gait. The air rippled in waves. The landscape stretched out in jagged rock formations and blackened glass, a distant mountain range spitting ash into the yellow sky. "All right, show me the station," Ethan said, his boots crunching something that sizzled and hissed beneath him. Vetrinox glided forward, its long limbs folding and unfolding like a mantis. "We will move quickly. Your kind's tolerance to hyperthermal exposure is not infinite. You'd be surprised." 10 minutes into the walk, Ethan's visor warning light blinked red. "Suit integrity's holding, but I'm going to need a recharge soon," he said. "We are nearly there," Vetrinox answered. A structure emerged ahead, tall, jagged, half embedded into a cliff wall. It looked more like a wound in the rock than a building. They entered through a narrow slit, the interior blessedly cooler. Ethan peeled off his helmet and exhaled. "Smells like burnt rubber and onions." "Volcanic off gas," Vetrinox replied. 2 engineers perished here last week. "Their remains were compromised. We are hoping your kind might be more suitable." Ethan blinked. "That's comforting." They reached a control room where several other aliens, all of different species, turned to look at him. One was shaped like a coiled spring with translucent skin. Another resembled a walking coral reef. A third, a thin green being with no visible mouth, approached and handed Ethan a tablet. "This is the diagnostic readout," it said in a voice like wind through reeds. "We believe the core stabilizer is fractured. We cannot approach the reactor chamber without molecular destabilization." Ethan studied the data. "You've got a heat bleed into the magnetic housing. That's why your shielding's failing. I can fix it, but I'll need to get closer." "Closer is death," Vetrinox said. "Yeah, well, I brought extra gloves." The preparation took 2 hours. Ethan suited up in a reinforced exo-frame designed for high radiation zones. As he approached the reactor chamber, the temperature climbed again, this time past anything his suit was rated for. He paused at the threshold, breathing slow and deep. "Morley, your vitals are destabilizing," Vetrinox warned over comms. "Noted." He stepped into the chamber. The air shimmered with heat. He could feel it through the suit now, like his skin was being peeled away molecule by molecule. He reached the damaged stabilizer and began attaching the thermal dampeners he had rigged from parts in the shuttle. 3 more minutes, he muttered. "You will not survive 3 more minutes," Vetrinox said flatly. "Then I better work fast." Sweat poured into his eyes. One of the thermal dampeners slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground. He cursed, crouched, retrieved it, and continued. His heart pounded in his ears. When the final unit clicked into place, the temperature around him dropped sharply. "I'm done. Pull me out." The moment he staggered out of the chamber, he collapsed. Alien hands lifted him, carrying him to the med bay. His skin was red and blistered. He drifted in and out of consciousness for the next several hours. When he finally woke, An alien with soft fur and glowing fingers stood over him, adjusting a fluid drip. "You suffered second-degree burns over 28% of your body," it said. "You also have heatstroke and minor tissue liquefaction in your left foot. Recovery will take time." Ethan groaned. "How long?" "A minimum of 6 weeks before you can walk unaided." He closed his eyes. "Could have been worse, at least the core's stable." Vetrinox entered, observing silently for a moment. "You are functional." "Barely." "You survived a region that has consumed every species we have sent. Your kind is difficult to categorize. That's our charm. You should not have lived." Ethan stared at the ceiling, voice dry. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Over the following week, Ethan lay in the med bay while the crew worked to re-establish power to the station. Vetrinox visited often, asking questions about Earth's climate, human biology, emotional thresholds, and especially about why he had volunteered for a mission so many others had refused. "You knew the risks," Vetrinox said during one of these visits. "Yeah, and yet you came." "Because if I didn't, you'd all be dead by the end of the month." Vetrinox did not answer. Instead, it watched a monitor showing the reactor's new stable output. By the third week, Ethan could sit up without assistance. The burns on his arms were fading, though the foot still required weekly regenerative therapy. He practiced walking again in a low-gravity chamber, the aliens adjusting the gravity to Earth's level for short sessions. "You are healing faster than projected," the medic noted. "I've got a wedding to attend back home," Ethan said. "Can't miss it." "Wedding? Never mind, long story." By the 5th week, he was walking with a cane. The aliens had begun inviting him to their planning sessions, asking his advice on climate stabilization, atmospheric filtration, and how to retrofit their stations for human-compatible heat shielding. "You still call this place uninhabitable," Ethan said during one session. "But you're the ones living here. It kills us slowly," one replied. "Earth's been doing that for centuries. We call it weather." There was silence. "Your species adapts in strange ways," Vetrinox said. "That's putting it kindly." When the next supply shuttle arrived to take him back to the orbital platform, the crew gathered at the landing pad. Ethan limped aboard, pausing at the top of the ramp. "Try not to melt anything while I'm gone," he called back. "You may return if you wish," Vetrinox said. "I'll think about it." The hatch closed. As the shuttle lifted off, he leaned back in his seat, eyes closed. His legs still ached, his skin itched constantly, but he was alive, and for some reason, that seemed to bother the aliens more than it comforted them. 3 days after Ethan returned to the orbital platform, the gravity regulator in the station's lower ring failed. Not catastrophically, just enough to fling a tray of nutritional gel packs across the mess hall and send a very surprised insectoid technician tumbling into the ceiling. Ethan, who had been trying to enjoy a tepid cup of coffee substitute, only sighed as the cup floated briefly before splashing into his lap. The station's command deck, a wide dome of alloy and obsidian glass overlooking the planet below, was unusually crowded when he arrived. Most of the crew were gathered around a central display where a cylindrical projection pulsed with crimson warnings. "I leave for 5 minutes, and you all start breaking the furniture," Ethan muttered, brushing off the last of the drifting gel from his sleeve. A short, crystalline alien with a voice like vibrating glass turned toward him. "Structural synchronization in the graviton relay has destabilized." The segment's rotational velocity exceeded safe variance, so it spun too fast. "Yes, then say that." The technician blinked a slow, vertical shimmer across its entire outer surface and stepped aside. Ethan leaned over the display and squinted at the readouts. He didn't bother asking for translation. Numbers were still numbers, even if the symbols looked like someone had sneezed during abstract calligraphy class. "Looks like the autocorrection sequence didn't trigger," he said. "Fail-safes probably fried. That system is enclosed within a non-pressurized conduit," said a voice behind him. "Exposure would result in rapid vascular collapse." Ethan turned to see Vetrinox entering through the side hatch. The alien's outer plating bore new grooves, possibly ceremonial, and its gate had developed a slight tilt since the last time Ethan saw it. "I'm not planning a swim," Ethan replied. Just need to patch the relay and reset the override. You remain eager to suffer. Habit, mostly. 20 minutes later, Ethan was drifting through the maintenance shaft in a patchwork suit cobbled from spare parts and thermal tape. Pressure differential pumps thumped around him like a distant heartbeat. He tugged himself forward along a tether, careful to avoid the exposed cable junctions. The conduit narrowed sharply ahead, barely enough room for his shoulders. "Vetrinox," he said into the comm, "tell me again why this thing wasn't built for actual maintenance. Your species' definition of actual is alarmingly broad." He exhaled, then twisted sideways and squeezed into the narrow gap. The relay housing loomed ahead, pulsing with residual charge. He braced himself against the wall and opened the panel. Several wires had melted into a fused knot. "Found your problem," he said. "Looks like someone tried to reroute the dampeners without grounding the coil." "That was our third engineer. Is the third engineer still alive?" "No." Ethan didn't respond, just started cutting away the damaged section. Sweat began to bead along his neck despite the suit's cooling liner. Every few seconds, the lights flickered. "I'm going to need about 15 minutes, he said. "Assuming the casing doesn't arc. If it does," Vetrinox asked, "then I'll be very upset." The repairs were delicate, not complicated, but slow. The relay's interior was designed for automated tools, not human hands. He had to improvise a stabilizer bracket using a bent strut from the wall panel and a touch of adhesive gel that smelled like vinegar and regret. "All right, test the system." A low hum reverberated through the conduit. The light stabilized. Gravity in the shaft shifted slightly, pressing him down just enough to notice. "Looks like it's holding." "Station rotation is returning to nominal," Vetrinox confirmed. "You have prevented physical injury to 17 occupants. Glad I'm useful." "You remain inexplicable." Back in the med bay an hour later, Ethan sat on the edge of a diagnostic platform while a new medic, this one a floating orb with dozens of jointed manipulators, scanned his vertebrae. "Your thoracic alignment is under strain," it said. "You compressed your spine during the conduit maneuver." "Yeah, I noticed when my back started making popcorn noises. You require a decompression session." "Do I get anesthesia or do you just hang me upside down and see what snaps first?" The orb paused, then rotated slightly. "The second option is more efficient." He stared at it for a beat. "You're kidding." "I do not possess that function." 3 hours later, Ethan was hanging from a suspension frame in a diagnostic chamber, arms strapped loosely above his head. The mechanism applied rhythmic pulses down his spine, stretching and releasing at intervals. It didn't hurt, but it wasn't pleasant either. It felt like being slowly disassembled and politely reassembled by someone who had only skimmed the instructions. Vetrinox stood nearby, arms folded. "You did not alert us to your injury," it said. "I figured you had enough going on. We monitor all vital signs." "Then you already knew." Vetrinox tilted its head. "We also monitor behavior." "You consistently understate your condition." "That's because if I wait until something's a real problem, you'll take it seriously and let me fix it. You are manipulating the prioritization protocol. It's called triage. You are not a medic." "No, but I used to be a paramedic." "Sort of." Vetrinox hesitated. "You have performed medical procedures." "Well, not here, but back home, yeah. Once had to stitch a guy's leg with fishing line and vodka." Explain. "He fell out of a tree while hunting. Middle of nowhere. No hospital for 100 miles. I had a tackle box, a bottle of cheap bourbon, and a stubborn patient. You used ethanol as an antiseptic. Better than nothing. Your species should not be alive. Tell me something I don't know." Later that cycle, Ethan was cleared to move freely again. He took a walk along the observation ring, a transparent corridor that circled the upper deck. Below, the planet still boiled. A fresh storm system churned across the equator, lightning spidering through the clouds in silent bursts. A pale, bipedal alien with a long, finned spine approached from the other direction, carrying a device shaped like a flattened spiral. "Human Morley," it said, offering the device. "We have completed the filtration redesign based on your suggestions." He took it and flipped through the diagrams. "Looks good. You added the condensation trap." "Yes." It was difficult to accept the logic of harvesting atmospheric moisture from a sulfur-based cycle. Welcome to the club. Half of what I do sounds stupid until it works. The alien blinked a slow, watery ripple across its eyes. You intend to test it during the next descent. Yeah, I've been cleared for short exposure missions. Your tissue damage has not fully resolved. I've had worse. The alien tilted its head. How are you still functional? Reckless optimism. Is that a medical treatment? No. It's a bad habit. The alien stared at him a moment longer, then walked away. By the end of the week, Ethan had returned to surface operations. The new filtration unit, strapped to his back like a makeshift leaf blower, hissed gently as it siphoned trace water from the air. He stood on a ridge overlooking a newly constructed outpost, the structure glinting like a half-buried coin in the ash. Behind him, the expedition leader, a six-legged being with a face like a weathered tree trunk, was coordinating cargo drops. You are contaminating your internal air supply, it said without turning. Ethan glanced at the small vent on his shoulder. Yeah, it smells like burnt eggs in here. Then why do you not retreat? Because if it smells bad, it means the filters are working. The leader's upper limbs flexed. You make decisions contrary to known risk models. That's because you keep using logic. And you use experience and a little stubbornness. The leader was silent for a moment, then, almost reluctantly, the station protocols have been updated to include your repair methods. Oh. Did you call it the Morley procedure? No, missed opportunity. As the sun dipped behind the toxic haze, Ethan sat on a crate and watched the horizon. A new storm brewed in the distance. The air shimmered with heat, but the filtration unit hummed steadily, and the outpost's internal systems were holding. For now, he pulled a ration bar from his pack. It crackled as he unwrapped it, tasted like compressed sawdust and regret, but it was warm and it wasn't trying to kill him. That was enough. The dust storm rolled in from the north like a living wall, tall as a city block and twice as fast. It swallowed the horizon in minutes, painting the sky in layers of ochre and static. Ethan had just finished bolting down the last of the new condenser units outside the outpost when the wind started shrieking through his helmet vents. Storms ahead of schedule, he muttered, checking the weather feed on his wrist. Of course it is. A few clicks away, the survey team was still calibrating atmospheric sensors near a sinkhole cluster. Their transport drone had powered down an hour earlier, fried by a localized lightning burst. Ethan had advised against deploying during fluctuating pressure epochs. They had not asked for his opinion. He climbed into the auxiliary crawler, a squat vehicle with armor plating thick enough to bounce small meteors, and gunned it toward the last pinged coordinates. The wheels churned over fractured terrain, throwing up plumes of dust that immediately vanished into the storm's edge. The outpost behind him disappeared from view before he'd cleared the first ridge. Why is it always sinkholes? He muttered, swerving around a fissure wide enough to swallow a tractor. The crawler's sensors blinked as he crested a slope. Below, half buried in sulfur-laced gravel, were three aliens clustered around a collapsed sensor array. The tallest one, a semi-rigid being with a segmented carapace, had one leg pinned beneath a support beam that had twisted on impact. The others were trying to lift it, but the wind was already gusting hard enough to throw pebbles like bullets. Ethan slammed the crawler into neutral and jumped out. His boots sank into the soft ground as he ran downhill, visor fogging momentarily from the heat differential. He reached the injured alien first and dropped to one knee. "Don't move," he said, wedging his shoulder under the beam. The creature clicked something that might have meant surprise or protest, but Ethan had already braced himself and pushed. The beam shifted just enough. With a grunt, he yanked the alien's leg free and dragged it back toward the crawler. One of the others grabbed the injured one's arms and helped haul it up the slope. Ethan staggered behind, wind slamming against his side. The moment they reached the crawler, he slapped the side panel and the rear compartment hissed open. "Get in," he barked. Now they piled in. Ethan followed last, slamming the hatch shut just as the first wave of particulate matter hit with a sound like tearing cloth. The crawler rattled but held. Inside, the cabin lights flickered green. The injured alien's leg was bent at the joint, exoskeletal ridges fractured and oozing a translucent yellow fluid. Ethan dropped his pack and yanked out the emergency kit. "This is going to sting," he told it, pulling out a field cauterizer. The alien didn't respond, but its limbs tensed as he applied the sealant. The sizzling noise was lost in the storm howls outside. Ethan secured a compression wrap around the joint and checked for circulation. "You'll walk again, but not today." The crawler lurched sideways, stabilizers groaning. "We're not going anywhere until this dies down," he said. "How long was your drone out before the collapse?" 17 minutes, replied the smaller alien, a thin, serpentine being with overlapping collar ridges. "We believed the atmospheric consistency would remain static." "Well, you believed wrong. This storm's got a vertical funnel signature. It's bouncing pressure off the lowland ridge and coming back twice as fast. You predicted this," I guessed. "Same thing, really. Try not to breathe too deep." These filters weren't rated for this kind of particulate. The injured alien let out a low, trilling sound somewhere between pain and apology. "Don't thank me yet. We're still stuck in a metal being sandblasted by the planet's bad attitude." Hours passed. The storm battered the crawler with increasing violence. Ethan rationed oxygen by lowering the internal pressure slightly. The others tolerated it without complaint, though one of them developed shallow spasms from the reduced density. Ethan rigged a pressure mask from the med kit, taping the seal with a strip of insulation foam. "You make tools from refuse," said the collar-ridged alien after watching him work, "and yet they function." "Yeah, Earth doesn't hand out gold-plated solutions." "You learn to make do with duct tape and a vague sense of optimism. Your species thrives on minimums. We call it winging it." When the wind finally died, it was nearly nightfall. A thin orange glow filtered through the storm's remnants. Ethan cracked the hatch and stepped out, boots crunching into a fresh layer of mineral dust that hissed as it cooled. The crawler was half buried. It took the better part of an hour to dig out the tires. The aliens assisted without question, even the injured one, who used its arms to help shift debris. They worked in silence, trading glances that no longer contained the wary confusion Ethan had grown used to. When they returned to the outpost, the command team was already waiting. Vetrinox stood at the front, arms folded. "You disregarded the recall transmission," it said. "I never received one. There were 3. Storm fried my receiver, or maybe I just ignored them." "Hard to say. You endangered yourself again. They'd have died otherwise. There were protocols." Ethan dropped his pack with a thud. "Then your protocols need rewriting." Silence. The serpentine alien stepped forward. "He saved us. The structure collapsed faster than we could react. The humans' actions were immediate and precise." Vetrinox said nothing for a long time. Then, "You will report to the medical bay." "I'm fine. You are limping." "Twisted my ankle in the gravel." "Report anyway." Ethan sighed. "Fine. But if that orb tries to hang me upside down again, I'm filing a complaint. Your species does not have jurisdiction. Then I'll invent one." The med bay was colder than usual. The floating orb scanned him silently while applying a dermal regenerator to his leg. Ethan stared at the ceiling. "Do you ever sleep?" he asked. "I enter low-function cycles between diagnostic intervals." "That's a no, then. Your fibula is strained, not fractured." "Great, I'll add it to my collection. You have exceeded recommended physical exertion thresholds for your physiology." "Yeah. I do that. You should not. Tell that to the planet." The orb paused. "You are not afraid." "Of what?" "Permanent damage, death, the unknown. I've been afraid of plenty, I just don't let it stop me." "You are aware that your actions are irrational." "Probably. But they work." Later that night, Ethan sat alone in the observation corridor, watching the stars through the haze. The planet's reflection shimmered faintly along the glass. Behind him, footsteps approached slow, deliberate. Vetrinox stood beside him without speaking. "You ever wonder what it's like to see Earth from up here?" Ethan asked. "I have reviewed your planetary data." "That's not the same." "No, it is not." They watched in silence for a while. "You continue to exceed our expectations," Vetrinox finally said. "Maybe your expectations were too low. Or perhaps your species is more complex than we assumed. We're a mess, but we're good at surviving messes. You have altered the operational doctrine of 3 departments. Good. Maybe now no one else gets buried by a faulty sensor array. Vetrinox turned to face him. You believe your presence here matters. I know it does. Then you will remain. Only if you stop calling me irrational. No, Ethan laughed. Fair enough. At sunrise, the outpost systems came online without errors. The new storm protocols were implemented. The injured surveyor returned to duty, limping slightly but proudly. The repaired crawler was given a name etched into its side in a dozen alien scripts. Mild Summer. Ethan read it with a grin, then walked away, already thinking about what needed fixing next.